Today's episode is brought to us by On the Clock. On the Clock helps unite employers with their accountants. So On the Clock delivers an easy and simple solution for accountants, accounting professionals, bookkeepers to access clients' employees' time card data for improved payroll processing experience. And by the way, less headaches for you. Providing time tracking services to more than 10,000 small businesses and counting, On the Clock packs a powerful, guess what, 4.8 average star rating from their users. So this is for independent accountants, bookkeepers, payroll providers. It's completely free for you, and small business owners get a 1-month free trial, and you can provide them a 20% discount. Learn more by visiting ontheclock.com, or by the way, you can download their mobile app from Google Play or the App Store. And for your clients, this is what some of them might say to you. Deborah is a client of a CPA. She said, "This is a great service recommended by our accountant. It keeps my employees honest and keeps track of time. I don't know what I would have ever done without it." And by the way, her accountant has a lot less stress too. So sign up today for your free account over at ontheclock.com to number one, expand your business, save you time, and remove some headaches. Ontheclock.com. Welcome to the Abundant Accountant Podcast, where all accountants come to learn all the ways to grow your firm. And when you're in doubt, I am here to help you out. So if you're ready to learn and ready to grow your firm, then you're in the right place to sharpen your skills and increase your revenue. Welcome to the Abundant Accountant Podcast. Before we welcome our very special guest to the show, if you're an accounting professional who's overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated, then this is really for you. I've created a simple 5-step process for accountants so you can feel confident positioning yourself as the expert, get consistent, high-quality clients, and have more people say yes to you and paying you what you're worth. And you can really work a little less all year round. You can get that complimentary at 5stepstoabundance.com. That's 5stepstoabundance.com. And just stop waiting around for that busy time of year and have clients pay you the fees you deserve and who actually appreciate the work you do for them. Once again, 5stepstoabundance.com to get access to the simple 5-step process that I use right now, and it's complimentary. Our special guest today is Paul Davis. Paul is an insightful personal advisor to business owners, CEOs, and celebrities internationally, helping them get off the hamster wheel and get their mojo back. He is an entrepreneur, an award-winning business growth consultant, speaker, and he's an author of several international best-selling books. One is called The Executive Code. He is also an accountant, and he shares that today in our interview. His podcast is also called the Executive Code Podcast, if you would like to tune into that. So now let's welcome Paul to the show.
Hi, Michelle. How are you? Good to be here.
Oh, I'm great. Thank you so much for being here with us on the Abundant Accountant Podcast. It's an honor to have you because I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today. But before we dive into today, can you share with everyone, I've already done your bio, but just, who you are, where you live, because you have a really cool accent, and just share with all the accountants listening, like who you are, what you do, and where you're from.
Sure. I suppose, people would probably be able to recognize from my accent. I'm not from the States. I'm from Ireland. And I grew up in Ireland, still live here, obviously. But I do travel to quite a lot of different countries around the world. I suppose my journey has taken me on quite a lot of different destinations, to be honest. I originally trained as a management accountant myself. And a lot of my career building would have been involved in mergers, acquisitions, and growing and scaling companies. That's what a lot of time I would have spent doing. And then when I set up my own consultancy practice in 2001, it was primarily to help people in professional services to how they could literally develop their business, grow it and scale it. And primarily in the areas of how they could get more clients, more fees and more time. And because, I suppose, because I'm an accountant myself, the first niche that I went after was accountants. So I worked with quite a lot of different accountants right around the world, primarily helping them to teach them how to get more clients, more fees, and more time. On the personal side, I'm married 28 odd years. We've two adult kids, two boys, 25 and 23. And literally in the last week, we just adopted a new dog. So that's just on the personal side.
That's cool. What kind of dog?
He's a mix between, I should say she's a mix between a collie and a German Shepherd. So she's actually quite large and she's 18 months old. So we adopted her from a family that she was too big to handle. So because my two lads are quite, like they're not young kids anymore, they're strong enough to handle her. So it's been good. Been adventurous for the first week or so, but it's been good.
I bet. Yeah. My family, specifically my father, loves border collies. So I've had a border collie when I was young as a kid, and then up until I went to college, and now they just got another one. He's a puppy like 9 months ago. So yeah, they're so smart. You know,
they're so intelligent. Yeah.
So intelligent. Yeah, I love it. And that's why I love intelligence in animals and in people. So, but
it helps.
Yeah, it does. But Paul, let's get into today, because if I were to sum up, when I work with accountants, most of them want to get more of the right quality clients. Let's just say that, not abundance and quality versus abundance and quantity. And all of them want to charge more fees, but it's scary. You know, I just finished one of my accountability calls with my Sales Master Momentum group. And one of the students that I have, you know, when it came to like follow-up time and reaching out and setting up meetings, you know, put it on hold. Like, oh, I'll do it next week. Because we're scared to double or triple our fees and really, you know, get paid all that we're worth. And we always talk about that here on the Abundant Account podcast, but I'm very excited to hear about, you know, the correlation between confidence and fees, and also how do you build confidence? We all talk about confidence, but how do you get confident, right? So I'm very excited for that conversation today. And how do you get more time? You know, we all only get 24 hours in a day. Unfortunately, there's no one getting extra. So that is our conversation for today. If you are listening and this is you, which I know there are some of you because I've talked to you, grab a pen and paper, because this is really important. It's important to grow your firm and also have that time freedom so you can have, you know, like Paul, you got 2 kids, you just adopted a dog, so you must have some free time on your hands.
I have a really good balance, I have to say, because when you talk about abundant accountants, you know, for me, abundance is in all areas of life. It's not, you know, if you asked me a number of years ago, it would be around financial abundance. But as I've gotten older, it's having abundance in all areas. So it's freedom, it's balance, it's relationships, it's joy, fun, fulfillment, it's everything into account. So when it talks about more time, what I found in working with accountants, so I've been working with accountants for over 15 years now. And one of the things that I'll always tackle with accountants is around their time management. So let's start there first of all.
Okay.
Because if I don't free up enough time with the people that I'm working with, well, then they're not going to implement all the other strategies around business development or getting more clients or increasing their fees. So a couple of the strategies that I give my clients is, first of all, you've got to zone your diary. Now, zoning your diary for me means that you allocate different categories of tasks throughout the week. And typically just 3 categories. One is administration. Second of all is client work. And that's where you're literally doing the fee earning work for your clients. And then the third category is business development. So if you're not doing administration, what typically happens for a lot of accountants is that a pile appears on their desk that they just keep adding to, and they never get to chip it away. But if they have a particular zone in their week, and it might only be, you know, an hour, 90 minutes, that they just keep chipping away at that administration work. The next piece is the client work, and that's where a lot of the time is spent for accountants by way of servicing their clients. And then the last piece is business development. And if you're not doing an element of business development every single week, well, then what happens is you end up being in the feast and famine cycle, whereby you start to run out of clients or you start to run out of fees, and you need to get money in as quickly as possible. So really what you do then is you start doing a whole load of business development activities. But as soon as the clients and the fees start to come in, you take your foot off the accelerator, and then you go back from having been in the feast back down into famine. So I've seen a lot of people go through this cycle of feast and famine. So the first area is around zone your diary. The next thing is, for me, it's my next strategy that I give my clients is you've got to pick 3 things to do each day. Now, everybody has a to-do list, but if you go back to my to-do list many years ago, there probably would have been a couple of 100 items on that to-do list.
Yeah, I know those to-do lists. Mine are like 3 to 5 now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, when you start to do any bit of research into how the human mind works, the mind can really only handle 3s. So meaning 3 things to do, or 3 items, or 3 things to remember. So there's a lot of power in the number 3 as well. Now, so if people have a long to-do list, it means that's really just a wish list. Like they know themselves they're never going to get around to everything. So the best thing to do is the evening before you close the office, before the next day, is you pick what are the 3 things that I need to get done tomorrow. And you've got to be reasonable in the sense of, they're achievable to be done based on what you have scheduled for tomorrow. So you might have client meetings, or you might have other staff meetings and so on. So the 3 things that you've got to get done by tomorrow. Now, if you've got those 3 things done by lunchtime, brilliant, because now it's helping to improve your confidence. And I'll touch on what are the 3 pillars of confidence. But it helps to improve your confidence because now you feel good about yourself because you've actually achieved it. And if you've got the afternoon then to do more things, well, then by all means do more things. The flip side of that is that people look at a to-do list and they get to the end of the day, and even though they've ticked a few items off the to-do list, the human behavior is to look at the gap, meaning what they didn't get done.
Why do we always go to the negatives? Especially, I know there's someone listening, an accountant, you're always thinking about the negative. Oh, this client's not going to pay me. Oh, they're never going to pay that much. Oh, God, I hope they show up on time. In your research and what you've looked into, Paul, why does the human mind go and attract like a magnet to the negative?
Perfect. Okay. So one is society and community and human behavior is everything that we've always grown up in school, our society, our community has always been looking at the negative. It's always been looking at that gap. So it's funny because one of the episodes that I released on my podcast was Mind the Gap. So instead of looking at the negative, so even if you're on a motorway or a freeway, you don't want to have that gap between the car in front of you and yourself, because you want to close that gap. You don't want anybody else in there. It's always looking at the negative side. But if we didn't go back to human behavior, go back to evolution, if we didn't look at the gap, we wouldn't develop. We wouldn't look for inventions. We wouldn't look to see, okay, how could we actually improve things? That's what the whole purpose of the gap was in the first place. That's what the whole purpose of what's missing. That's what we're drawn towards. But we actually, over the millennia, we've actually turned it around to be, and it is actually a negative, because now we beat ourselves up by not actually achieving and looking at all the negative aspects of the gap. Whereas in reality, what it was supposed to be was, no, what do we actually need to invent? What do we need to develop? So it's an evolution piece that was in our minds at the time.
That's so interesting because it all ties back to the confidence piece. So back in the day, we looked to, invent and learn, and now it's become even, more of a negative. So.
Yeah. Now, confidence impacts absolutely every single aspect of our life.
Yep.
So whether it be business or how we manage our team, or how we have that negotiation with a client, or how we literally pitch that price or the proposal for a client, but also in our personal lives, it actually has an impact from our, how well we interact with other people, or how well we push ourselves or strive for more. So it actually impacts every single aspect of our life. And people, they don't put as much emphasis on it because they don't feel that it's possible to increase confidence. Because over the years, people have labeled confidence as being, well, some people are confident and I'm not confident. And therefore, that's just how I am. That's just my personality and it's never going to change. So therefore, there's nothing I can do about it. But actually, what if you drill down enough, and if you ask very, very powerful questions, which is what I do when I coach my clients, when you ask particular questions, you find out that actually it's not confidence at all. It's competence. Two completely different things altogether. So if I was to ask, and even your listeners, if you were to find for yourself, what are the areas that you don't feel confident in? And, as we're discussing fees and we're having those negotiations with our clients, and how do we actually increase our fees, and how do we, have that conversation with our clients? If you were to literally drill it down even further, you'd actually find, and ask those powerful questions, what you'd find is it's not confidence at all. It's one aspect of it, but it's not the main prerequisite of it. It's actually competence. And competence is we just don't know how to do it. We don't know how to have that conversation with a client. We don't know what we should be charging. We don't know how to put that proposal together. So competence is made up of 3 pillars. And the 3 pillars of competence are skills, knowledge, and experience. When you develop the skill of having that conversation with your client, and you develop the knowledge, meaning, so what's the conversation? What's the structure of the conversation? And normally when I'm working with accountants, I give them 5 questions to ask. When they follow those 5
I want to know the 5 questions, Paul, but I also want you to share a story of a client that had no competence in all those areas of how to price, how to that, is there one client specifically, and you can make up the names so we don't disclose any names, but share with us what it was like when they came to see you in the beginning. And then, after they realized that the competence was the missing link in order to build the confidence, and once they had the skills, the knowledge, and the experience, because I agree with you, like when it comes to the sales process, for example, and I work obviously with some of you on sales, we don't have the confidence because they're lacking the competence and no one's ever taught you sales. So it's not your fault. It's not like when you got your CPA or EA, your master's in tax or any of that. I always talk about that. How to sell and enroll your clients in high prices wasn't part of the curriculum, but I have the curriculum for that. But like you're saying, the competence piece is actually the thing that's missing. So I would love if you could share like an exact story of someone we can, put ourselves in their shoes and go through this process, and obviously share the 5 questions that you asked her or him to start building the competence, which also then improve the confidence.
Okay, so I'll try and share as much as I can, because there's a lot of those elements or pieces that make it all up. But there's one person that always comes to mind when I get asked this question, because I get asked this question an awful lot on, in workshops or conferences and that kind of side of things. And there's one person that many, many years ago that I taught in particular conversation the questions to ask their client. And they told me exactly what they would normally charge before for this kind of typical piece of work as an accountant. Now, I'm going to have to preempt this, because your listeners may be absolutely shocked when I tell them the figures, because the figures are literally astronomical. And in some respects, they're not going to believe them, but they are absolutely real and true. Second of all, I'll tell you that the flip side of what happened post the particular conversation. And also another thing that typically comes up in workshops, and this is where the self-worth comes into play. And then also a few other different elements by way of what's right or what's wrong. So it touches on ethics, and it touches on a few, it presses a lot of buttons for people. Let's put it that way, Michelle.
Good. I like to press buttons. At the Abundant Accountant podcast, we can't have the abundance and, like you said, the abundance in your personal life and at work and in our to-do list, right? Abundance and to-do list, people think, oh, I got 100 things, right? That's, like you said, your wish list. I think an abundance to-do list is what are the 3 or 5 things that are going to make the biggest bang for your buck, right? And for your time. And how do you reduce, like you said, we're getting more clients, but quality clients. We're getting more money, so our profitability increases and the value of a client increases. And how do we reduce our time? I've had, 400 phone calls with various CPAs and enrolled agents and, high-level tax planning professionals. And I think those 3, and you all tell me if I'm wrong. You can send me an email to hello@thepitchqueen.com if those 3 aren't top priority on your list. So we like to push buttons, because when you push a button, that's how we move and take action and change. If we don't change, then we're going to be stagnant. Who really wants to be stagnant and do the same thing over and over again? Not me.
Yeah, exactly. So if I was to give an average of the average fee increase of the clients that I would have worked with.
Who's the person we're hearing the story on?
Okay, so let's just call him Dave.
Dave. All right. So we need everyone listening, Dave, and you can write down all these stats and figures to say, oh, okay, this is possible. All right, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely possible. So the average fee increase is 274%, independently tested. Okay. So I had a conversation with Dave and I outlined in relation to the kind of clients that he need to be working with and pitching a little bit higher, above his, as I say, punching above his weight. Okay. Now, Dave he does tax work as well as being an accountant. So he straddles both sides. So he does compliance work for clients, but he also does tax consultancy or tax advice.
Okay.
Now, for a particular piece of work, which was involved in succession planning, meaning there was an element of inheritance and there was an element of what happens with the business going forward, because given the age bracket of his particular client. Now, normally, what Dave told me, what he would charge for that piece of work is in around 26,000 euros. Now, in euros, not too far from dollars, is probably close to maybe $30,000, just to give an idea of the pricing. Okay, so I taught my client the particular question to ask, how to have the conversation, how to build that connection with your clients, and all the kind of sort of things. Dave had a conversation with the client, brand new client, hadn't been with a client before. Do you want to know what the fee was that he agreed?
I'm going to guess 3 times that. So $90,000.
Exactly 3 times it.
Well, you know what, Paul? I have a new class that just got started, and there's 2 people in there. We're only in our third week out of about 10 weeks. And one of them said, I always encourage, let's just start with double. But first, and I'm not sure about Dave, but if Dave did an inventory of the value of his education, his continuing education credits, all the books he's read, his school, his experience, all the mistakes he's made and learned from, what would that equate to, right? And so I had my students do this exercise, and then they're all meeting at least 2 brand new clients a week and just slowly implementing everything we're doing. And 2 of them, one doubled their fee. They got the new client. And, 2 weeks ago, they would have done it for about $150. So they had like a 900% increase. But the other one, she even said, Michelle, I have been undercharging and undervaluing myself for over 3 years since I started this business, and it's no more. And that subtle, like you said, competence, right? Because she learned something new, tried it, it worked. She charged 3 times. So, normally the engagement would have been about $2,000 and she charged $6,000 for the engagement. So, okay, continue with Dave. But yeah, that's how I got 3 times.
Perfect. And let me touch on one thing, because you've actually brought something else up, because it fits into the confidence side of things. So I've told you there's 3 pillars to competence, which are skills, knowledge, and experience. The 3 pillars to confidence is self-care, self-belief, and self-worth. So when it comes to self-worth, the exercise that you've done with your clients is literally getting them to see what their worth is, to see all the knowledge that they have, all the experience that they have, and what's the value of that worth for them. Now, a really, really good question to ask, and you probably asked this already for your clients, but even for the listeners here, a question to ask when it comes to self-worth and what's the difference that it makes for your clients is literally to start to document or to list down, by the advice that you give to your clients, what difference does it make for them? What's the value of the advice that you give to your clients? Meaning, not the value of your time. Forget about time just for the moment. But if your client implements the advice that you give them, what's the difference it makes for them? And when you start to list down all the differences that it makes for them, primary, secondary, and tertiary benefits of that difference for them, now you can actually see it from their side of things, meaning the client side. And that absolutely has a direct impact on your self-worth, because now you're seeing the value of what you're bringing to your clients, the value of your advice, the value of your service, of what your interactions with your clients. You're now seeing, and you're putting a much more tangible view of what that advice is for your clients. So let's get back to Dave. So Dave negotiated and agreed, and the client was extremely happy to pay the 90,000. And as part of the 90,000, he got a 25% of it paid up front before the service was even delivered, because that's one other side of things that I teach my clients to do, is getting paid in advance for the work that you're doing.
Me too, Paul. Me too. We don't.
Perfect. So we're all on the same page then.
But in America, there's a thing called Circular 230. And until you have an engagement signed, you shouldn't be working for them anyway, based on that rule. So if you're working for clients and they haven't paid you and signed an engagement letter, you're actually not doing it the legal way. And all my smart, intelligent accountant clients have shared that with me.
Yeah. So the flip side of what happened to Dave is that because I hadn't previously done any work with him on his self-worth side of things, I had done everything by way of teaching him the conversation to actually have with his clients, look at it from the client's perspective, not from his perspective. So it did have a knock-on effect to his self-worth. But what actually then happened on the flip side, which is the word of caution, is that he then over-serviced the client. So he then felt bad about the fact that he would normally charge €26,000 or $30,000, that he would normally charge $30,000, but now he was ended up charging €90,000 or whatever the dollar equivalent of that is. So he felt bad inwardly himself. So he over-serviced that client. So that's a word of caution. But now, if you were to take it, when I figured out, when I tricked that with him by way of what he was doing with his client in over-servicing, then I had to work with him on his own self-worth and his own self-care and his own self-belief.
And what did you do for self-care and self-belief? Let's touch on that with those two, with Dave specifically, because I think we've touched on self-worth and the exercise that you all can do. But when it comes to self-belief and self-care, because those are, again, the three pillars to self-confidence. I love how you broke that down. Confidence is what gets you your free time, more money from clients, better quality clients. So can you share with what you did with Dave to improve self-care and self-belief?
Yeah, and these are all, while it's relevant to Dave, it'll be relevant to every single one of your listeners, and it's relevant to every single one of my clients that I work with. And I do go in a lot more detail in my podcast, but if you look at self-care now, normally when I'm talking to people, like say on the podcast and so on, I use the word self-care because males don't like the word love. So really self-care for me is actually self-love. The two of them go hand in hand. So if self-love resonates with you more, well then use the term self-love. Females, I have found, much prefer the term self-love, whereas males are a little bit more acceptable of the term self-care because it's a little bit more macho. So let's look at self-care, self-love. Let me tell you a little story first of all, a bit of an analogy. If you're constantly giving and not receiving for yourself and not looking after yourself, something's going to give. So if you can think about it a bit like your smartphone, if you're not recharging your smartphone, it's going to die. Now, if you ever have gone and visited somebody, say, for me, it was my granny that I used to go to, and you'd go and visit your granny and she'd bring you into the good room. In Ireland, we always have a good room. So she'd bring you into the good room and she'd bring in a tea set, and the tea set was always china, and she'd pour out the tea. Now, if you can visualize this, whereby your granny is bringing you into the good room and she's making you a cup of tea, and you've got a china teacup on a saucer, and she's pouring the tea into the cup, and she keeps pouring because she's distracted because she's still talking to you, but she keeps pouring that tea into the cup to the point that now it's overflowing, and the tea now is overflowing onto the saucer. That's what we have to do for ourselves. And the whole point of it is we have to give from the saucer, not from the cup. So we've got to constantly recharge ourselves. We've constantly to look after ourselves. Because you're accountants, and we're all accountants in this particular field, we're always giving. We're always looking after our clients. We've got our clients' best interests at heart. So we're always giving. But if we're always giving, and think of it from an accounting term point of view, if you're always withdrawing from your bank account, well, then where's the deposits going in? Because we also have to deposit into ourselves, and that's where self-care and self-love comes about. So self-care or self-love, what it looks like by way of different practices, And the practices are different for different people. But for some people, it might be meditation, it might be mindfulness, it might be yoga, it might be Pilates. It might be literally as simply as going for a walk along the beach or going for a walk in the forest in woodland. It may be going for a game of golf. It may be reading a good book. It may be going for a massage. There's a whole load of different ways of how you're literally looking after yourself. But it's finding the activities that literally resonate particularly with you, and therefore when you've done the activity you absolutely feel completely exhilarated. So for me, many years ago, I used to do horse riding. Now I'm slowly getting back to it. I had to stop it for a few years because I had to get neck surgery done. But for me, horse riding was part of my self-care routine, because you just have to be. Horses are hugely intuitive, and because I'm intuitive myself, you have to be in sync with the horse. So the only thing you can think about is you and the horse. That's it. You can't think of anything else. So for me, taking that hour out with the horse was literally one of my forms of self-care. So it's looking at finding ways of what it is for you. And Michelle, I'm sure there's things that you do that you may not have considered self-care.
Oh, I preach this, Paul. And your analogy of giving from a full saucer, because the tea overflowed in the cup and into the saucer, is how you have to see how you take care of yourself, because we can't be giving and charging $90,000 to a client like Dave did, without, like you said, he was over servicing the client, but he was probably over servicing from a depleted inside too, right? So he had like a double whammy going on. And when we have the double whammy going on, so here's what I do, Paul. I go to acupuncture. I go to this place called Stretch You at least once a week. I booked massages for my boyfriend and I about 2 weeks ago in this like place outside with koi ponds, because everything has to be outdoors right now. I treat myself to something from Lululemon every once in a while, a little retail therapy. There's all sorts of things. I eat really healthy about 80-90% of the time. And sometimes self-care looks like a really good cup of birthday cake ice cream, and for me, it's the gym every single day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 if I feel like it. Because if I don't start out my morning taking care of myself, then I can't be the best here for you on the podcast. I can't be the best for my sales classes. I can't show up to be the best for enrollment calls with clients who really need that. And I actually also started, Paul, volunteering for the suicide prevention hotline. Oh boy.
That's a subject very close to my heart. Yeah.
Yeah. So they talk about self-care also so much. And, after a volunteer shift, you have a debrief with your supervisor, and, because you can't give, that's a life or death on the line pretty much. So that level, and I have to fit, like you said, I think the saucer analogy visual was so powerful, at least for me it was, because every time I go to London, Paul, I love sitting in the tea room where they bring you out this 3-tier platter of like macaroons and little sandwiches and chocolates and tea. And it is just the most, I could sit in the tea room and be content for hours. Granted, my body probably doesn't need all the calories, because that's not good self-care for me, because I would just eat it all and drink all the tea. But how can you give from the saucer? And I believe, and, I focus on this in my accountability program. We talk about, what are you doing for self-care? Some accountants have shared, they go for walks. They're listening to podcasts, not accounting related. So if you're religious, maybe a spiritual one, or maybe biographies of like just audiobooks, podcasts. Some have done, kettlebells, some weight training, walking the dog, a walk around the lake, just getting outdoors. So everyone's is different. Okay, I know we've honed in a lot on that, but I love self-care. Okay, let's talk about self-belief. Okay.
Before we go there, can we go a little bit deeper on this one?
Sure.
Because it's so important. But before I go there, let me ask you a question. After you go for your acupuncture, or you go for your retail therapy, or you go for all the different things that you've done, how do you feel afterwards?
I feel calm. I feel recharged. Like you said, all my devices, including my car, Paul, I have a Tesla. I have to take the car to charge because I like to get out of the house. I don't charge at home. I have free charging. I have to recharge everything. But how come so many people don't recharge themselves? So it's almost like I go to acupuncture, and then when I leave, I got full green bars. My green bar is full. It says I'm at 100%. And then I have a class. I have a sales call, and now I'm at like 60%. And then 2 days later, I'll go to stretch you and get stretched. Oh, I'm back at 100. And I go to the gym, and the gym gives me 10 to 15% charge. But I think like the acupuncture or the stretch, or maybe a little retail therapy, or maybe the once a week ice cream shop, those get me to 100, because every day I need to get to, like you said, 100 or 105. So if I do stretch you and acupuncture back to back, my bars can only say 100, but I probably feel like I'm at 110, 115.
Yeah. Now, we all feel absolutely amazing in different levels when we do something for ourselves. But let me go a little bit deeper. If you can imagine how you feel yourself about after doing all the different types of activities that you do for yourself from a self-care or self-love perspective, that energy that you're bringing to your team, into your business, to your clients when you're having meetings with them, the conversations that you're having with your clients, when you've got a full battery inside that's completely recharged, that energy you're bringing to your business, you're bringing to your clients, you're bringing to your staff, you're bringing to everything that you're doing within the business itself. So it's absolutely, if you want your business to perform much, much better than what it's performed right now at the moment, it's absolutely so important to look after yourself first.
Yep.
So let's go a little bit deeper. You see, self-care is not just about what we do for ourselves. It's also about what we allow other people to do to us.
Yep. Your boundaries.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, and the boundaries come into play in a lot of different respects, both professionally and personally. So if we're allowing others, so let's take it from a client's perspective. If we're allowing our clients, for one better word, to abuse us in the terms of that they always ask for more than what they're paying or what the fee was agreed. If they don't pay for the service on time, meaning they don't pay their bill within the terms that have been agreed. If they constantly abusing us from a lot of different ways, it's not necessarily physical abuse, but it's abuse from the format of how they actually interact with us. So self-care also comes into play in relation to how we allow other people to impact us from that side as well. So that's self-care.
All right, let's talk about self-belief before we wrap up, because this is part 1, Paul. We got to do this again.
Okay.
All right, so let's just wrap up with self-belief. And then all of you who are sitting at the edge of your chair wanting another teacup analogy or charging your devices analogy, we'll have Paul back for more, okay? But not today. Today, our cups are almost full. We're about to pour over, Paul. So,
okay.
So let's just hear about your self-belief, what you did with Dave. And share what you did with Dave and what you can do. And then, we'll book part 2. This is part 1, everybody. So don't worry. He's coming back. He just doesn't know it yet. I'll talk to him offline.
You just like the Irish accent, Michelle. That's all.
That too. I just envision myself at the Marriott in London right now, because I love their accents too. I'm just envisioning tea time, and I kind of miss my tea time.
Okay. Self-belief. Belief is all about your knowledge or your knowing that you can achieve whatever it is that you're putting your mind to. That's what belief is. That's what self-belief is. So how do we build it? Well, go back to what you touched on at the very beginning, Michelle, and what I refer to as mind the gap, whereby we always look at the negative. We always look at our deficiencies. We always look at what we didn't do so well, and we constantly are beating ourselves up. So we're always looking at the negatives, not the positives. So with that in mind, we don't necessarily have practices whereby we start to accumulate what we have actually achieved. So even if you do one particular exercise following this particular podcast and list out, so what have I achieved over the years? So go back to, let me put it this way, I'm now currently 52. That's my age. So, and I'm using that as for a reason. if you were to go back over your age right now at the moment, and Michelle, I'm not going to ask you your age, don't forget.
41. I'm 41. It's okay.
So if you take your age and break it down into decades, so your first decade is from 0 to 10, and then 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, and now 41 onwards. Okay.
Shoot, I'm almost at 5 decades, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. But you're still way, way younger than me, I have to say. So take each one, and on a separate piece of paper, list down each one of those decades. And then recall yourself back into each one of those and list down all the things that you achieved, all the things that you were proud of, all the things that you did really, really well within each one of those decades. And the reason why I break it down into decades is because, if you take the first 10 years, that's when we're growing up and, going to preschool and early school. The next set of decades is when we're perhaps maybe starting our career. So that's why we break them down into decades. So therefore, it makes it easier for us to recall. Well, then, my God, remember those exams that we passed, or remember those certificates that we got for achievement, or the games that we won, or whatever it might be. By the time you finish the exercise and you've listed down all the different things, and keep going back to it, keep adding to it, and bring it forward even to the last 10 years of your life, as your recent life, as in the last 10 years, and start to list down, what are all the things that you achieved within your business, the things that you achieved for your clients, the impact that you made for your clients. List down all of those things. By the time you're finished that particular exercise, what you've now got is one whole document, a bit like a folio.
I call it a brag book, Paul.
Oh, brilliant. Perfect.
Yeah, and for the ladies out there, the guys might not think this is macho, like you were saying earlier, but you can put pictures, you can make it like a scrapbook, and it is so powerful. And I totally agree, Paul, that this is one of the tools that if you don't do anything else of what we talked about today, I would definitely do this. Paul, I do need to wrap up today, but we're just wrapping up part 1. I will book Paul for part 2, everybody. This was phenomenal. I feel like I need to go have some macaroons, a tea with a little hot milk and lemon, and overpour it onto the saucer so I can give to many more people today. But Paul, it's such an honor to have you here on the Abundant Accountant Podcast. This was great. So thank you so much for being here. Is there any last words of advice or wisdom for part 1 that you want to leave everyone with?
Listen, there's so much I could say on these, to be honest with you, Michelle. I go into a lot more detail on my own podcast, which is the Executive Code. But obviously, we'll talk more on part 2. But yeah, literally do the exercise that I suggest, because it does have a significant impact in relation to the fees that you're going to charge, the kind of clients that you're going to go after. Go for those more sweet spot clients that you want to work with. So yeah, there's loads more we can talk about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. It was an honor to have you, and we'll see you in part 2. Thank you all so much for joining me here today on another amazing episode of the Abundant Accountant Podcast. This was part 1 of part 2. So Paul will be back. He had so much goodness. And, like he said, it's time to make that brag book. We need to shift the mind. What does he call that? Mind the gap. We need to shift that into positive. And I'm so grateful that I try to focus on all the positives. But what'd you do from 0 to 10? What'd you do from 11 to 20? What'd you do from 21 to 30 and so on? Because this is the thing that's going to really shift. But I do want to share also that another thing that each of you could do today is think about one thing you can do for your self-love, self-care. We never want to give from the cup. We want to give from the saucer, like he shared. And I need to go have some macaroons and hot tea with some milk right now, because ever since he shared that picture, it is stuck in my head. And a personal story, I was in London with my mom. This is about 2 years ago. And, doing my podcast, teaching class. And every day in the hotel at the JW Marriott, right in the central heart of London, was tea time. And I'd sit there for hours during tea time. And there was the pillar of macaroons, the pillar of little petite sandwiches with the crust taken off, and your tea. And the teacup always came with the saucer. And I can't share with you how good that visual is. Or if you're more of the electronic person, think about your battery charged and how we plug it in all night. And it might be at 100% at 11 p.m., but at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., it's still plugged in. And how can we recharge ourselves? Not from, sleep is very important. I get 8 to 9 hours a night, but something that fills up your teacup so it overflows onto the saucer before you have your next client meeting or before you go to work the next day to energize your team. So I love today's episode. I hope you really got something out of it. And if you did, I'd be grateful if you would leave a written review for the show. So just on Apple Podcast, you can scroll down and hit write a review. If you could write a review about how this podcast has helped you and your firm, I would be grateful. And lastly, I just see way too many accountants like you who are overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated. And if that's you, I've created a simple 5-step process so that you can feel confident positioning yourself as the expert, get consistent, high-quality referrals, and easily have more people say yes to you so you can get paid your worth, no matter what you charge, and while working less all year round. So if you want to pick that up, it's complimentary over at 5stepstoabundance.com. And really just stop waiting around for busy season. Take action now and have clients actually appreciate the work you do for them. That's 5stepstoabundance.com to get access to the 5-step process. Today's episode, just a reminder, was brought to you by On the Clock. On the Clock unites employers with their accountants, and On the Clock delivers an easy and simple solution for bookkeepers to access clients' employee time cards and have improved payroll processing experiences. And by the way, a lot less headaches. So providing time tracking services to more than 10,000 small businesses and counting. And did I mention they've been around since 2004? On the Clock packs a powerful 4.8 average star rating for their users. Independent accountants, accounting professionals like you, CPAs, EAs, bookkeepers, and payroll providers, this is absolutely free to you, and you get to give your clients a 30-day free trial. So that's for the businesses. To learn more, head on over to ontheclock.com or download their mobile app from the Google Play or the App Store. And for some of your business clients, this is what one of them has said to our CPAs. Deborah is a business owner, and she said, "This is a great service recommended by our accountant. It keeps my employees honest, and it keeps track of the time, so I don't have to do anything. And I don't know what I would have ever done without it." So if you're looking to make your life more efficient and spend more time at home with the kiddos or lay on the couch and watch some Netflix, then remove some of the stress and give On the Clock a try. ontheclock.com, get your free account, and I will see you in the next episode.